So take us to the beginning of Richard Bilkszto's story.
Thanks, Megyn. Richard Bilkszto, his passion was always education. He loved teaching and mentoring, and especially kids who came from the most marginalized and underprivileged backgrounds. And he really felt that he could make a difference to a young person's life. Not all of us get to live our dreams, but he actually got to live his dream of teaching. He was a lifelong educator. He was loved by his students and admired by his colleagues, his peers, and school board officials. And he was recognized as a leader in adult education here in the province of Ontario, where I live and where Richard Bilkszto lived. And that was his expertise, teaching young adults in the province. He retired in 2019, but he loved teaching so much that he worked as a supply principal at various adult learning centers. And he did this not because he needed the money, but he truly loved what he did. And in 2020, Richard Bilkszto was hired as a principal at an adult learning center in Toronto. His work was so appreciated that school board officials wanted him back for the fall of 2021. So he signed a new contract in April of that year. That's when his life really began to fall apart because of this one incident that happened at a DEI training session. Now, the Toronto District School Board, which is the country's largest school board, decided to run an equity, diversity, and inclusion event. And this was outsourced to a well-known DEI consultancy firm in Toronto called the Kojo Institute. And as a principal,
Kojo.
KOJO, which is named after, I believe, after its CEO, Kiki Ojo-Thompson, and we'll be coming back to her in a bit because she's an important part of the story, obviously.
Is.
And as a principal, he was expected to attend, but it's important to keep in mind here that that's not why he went, and this I've pieced together from people who knew him well, people who were close to him. He was always looking out for opportunities where he could improve himself professionally because he loved what he did so much that he wanted to do his job better. And it's also very important to keep in mind here, Megyn, that Richard was very much on the progressive left. He truly believed in things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. He was gay. And the first session begins April 19th, 2021, goes off without incident. Nothing, as far as I'm aware, happened there. But it all began at the second training session on April 26th, where Kiki Ojo-Thompson, the CEO of Kojo Institute, and she's running the training session, she makes a claim that Canada is a bastion of white supremacy and that Black Canadians, African Canadians in Canada experience racism that is far worse here in Canada than in the US.
All right, let me stand you by because we have a little bit of that. We've got some sound bites and I'll play them where appropriate. But here's just a taste of that exact moment that you just referred to in soundbite 1.
The racism is we experience it far worse here than there. So I know that's going to be a hard one for people to wrap their head around, but that's the level of white supremacy. Like Canada's a bastion of white supremacy and colonialism. Like they at least had a fighting posture against at least the monarchy. Here we celebrate the monarchy, the very heart and soul and origins of the colonial structure. Think about that, right? And all that it represents. We hold it dear still.
Keep going.
Now, Richard had, he had taught in an inner city high school in Buffalo, a school with a large African-American population. And he felt that this claim made by Kiki Ojo-Thompson needed to be challenged. And he felt that people of color were far more disadvantaged in the US than in Canada. And he put that view out in the DEI session. He says, look, Canada, we have a lot of problems.
We've got that too, just a bit. And this is pretty bold. I mean, this is bold, but really it's a guy kind of trying to defend his own country too, saying, I've been in America. It's way worse there. It's not worse in Canada than it is in America, which, we could debate all day. Who cares? But the point is, this is his point of view. And he's trying to rehabilitate Canada to an extent with this Kiki. And here's a little bit of what he said in SOP 2.
I just want to make a comment about the Canada-U.S. thing, and I have a little bit of a challenge of it. I did my student teaching in the U.S. and have spent a lot of time in the U.S. And to say here, honestly, that Canada is not a more just society than the United States is, and we talked about facts and figures. I invite everyone here to do some research, and you look at things. Yeah, absolutely. And look at things like education, and look how more you think about a system we have in Ontario where every student is funded equally. You go to the United States, they're funded based on their tax base. We have a public education system where everyone is funded the same way. It's not like that in the United States. We have a healthcare system here where everyone has access to healthcare. It is not the same way in the United States. So to sit here and say, all honesty, we're talking about facts and figures, and to walk into the classroom tomorrow and say Canada's just as bad as the United States, I think we're doing an incredible disservice to our learners.
So it's a perspective from somebody who's lived in both countries that any normal, open-minded person running even a DEI session would say, oh, an interesting point. Let's talk about it. No, that's not how it went. I'll just cut to the next soundbite and then I'll give it back to you. Here's Kiki's response to what he said, and you'll hear Richard on the back end. Here's how she handled it.
So what's fascinating is, and this is why we're in this place that we're in, is that you think, so we're here to talk about anti-Black racism, but you and your whiteness think that you can tell me what's really going on for Black people? Like, is that what you're doing? Because I think that's what you're doing, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to leave you space to tell me what you're doing right now.
Exactly. I just wanted to make the point. You were talking about the United States,
okay,
and I just want to do a comparison. And as I said, you talked about facts and figures, and listening to the facts and figures. And I think if everyone here looks at the facts and figures and all kinds of studies, and you'll see we're a far more just society.
Okay, can I just say this, Rupa? This is like, I hate the term, but it does work. It's triggering for me because we pulled our kids out of these New York City schools that were super woke. I mentioned my daughters, but my son's was just over the top on all this stuff, race, gender, all of it. And they had a racial presentation there at our son's school that walked you through how you're a racist if in response to a person of color telling you you're a racist or that America's racist, if your first response is to question it in any way, that's further evidence of your racism. Totally right out of the Robin DiAngelo handbook. And this was presented to the parents at the school in a slideshow by their new head of DEI as fact. If you have any resistance to the notion that America's racist or you're racist as a white person, further evidence of your racism, and that's just your denial, and you're working through like a 10-step program to where finally, if you get beaten over the head with it enough, you'll recognize you're a racist, America's racist, and only once you land in that point, have you come full circle on the DEI training and sort of get your gold star. So I totally see what she is doing to him. You're not allowed to challenge a Black person speaking about this issue. Period. The mere fact that he could have said anything that was challenging. Didn't have to be what he said. It's not allowed. Go ahead.
Well, yes. I mean, Ojo Thompson, as we heard in that clip you just played, reacts angrily, accuses him of white privilege, and accuses him of not understanding the plight of Black Canadians. And then after that, things go from bad to worse. Ojo Thompson, after that interaction, seemed to wanted to make an example out of Richard. And in another clip that we obtained, she refers to him as a weed, and that they got the weed whacker out today, and she's laughing as she says that.